So since we just sang a song about the table, or with receiving the elements, maybe more listen to a song about the table, I'm going to give you a preview of what's to come near the end of what we're going to talk about this morning. You can write it down if you want to. You can tuck it in the back of your head. I wasn't planning on doing this, but it's just so perfect. So I'm going to throw this idea out to you ahead of time, and then I want you to hang on to it as we continue throughout our morning this morning. But the table is the place where strangers become friends, and where friends become family. The table is where strangers become friends, and where friends become family. I'm going to invite you to do something. If this isn't going to put you to sleep, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for a moment. And I want you to just kind of put yourself in a different place. We're in a building in southern Indiana. I want you to transport yourself to the beach. And when I say the beach, as nice as Pride's Creek Beach is, I'm talking like an ocean beach. You can kind of hear those waves crashing in over and over and over again. I would imitate it, but I do terrible impersonations of sounds, so I'm not going to. Kind of smell that salty air coming in off the water. Now, some of you right now are going, why am I sitting in a building in southern Indiana? I want to be on that beach right now. Some of you were just at a beach not very long ago, and you're wanting to go back. Put yourself there, because that's where I was a week ago, and I wanted to just let all of you know where I was a week ago. I was hanging out by a beach, and it was incredible. Every morning, we woke up for 5 straight mornings. I would go out to the living room, and I would open up the windows to the VRBO, the condo that we were in, and I would just listen to the waves crashing onto the beach just over and over again. And then I would breathe deep, and unfortunately, instead of that wonderful smell of salt coming off the water, I would smell the weed from our neighbors just wafting into the windows, and sitting there going, I really hope we don't do one of those random drug tests when I get back, because I'm pretty sure I've got a contact high from being here for this amount of time. But it was so incredibly peaceful. So last Sunday morning, I woke up, and that's exactly what I did. I went out to my spot that I had claimed. Just so you know, we were there for a conference. We just took a couple of extra days. But I would go out, and I would find my spot, and I'd open the windows, and I'd listen to the waves, and I'd open up my Bible, and I would begin to read. And last Sunday, when I was done, I turned on YouTube, and we worshiped with you all. We sang this, well, we didn't sing out loud, but we sang the songs, and we listened to Pastor Carey come up and talk about how God will scatter the church if the church won't scatter on its own. And we listened with you, and we learned with you. And then, and I keep saying we, I mean Sarah and myself, and then Mike and Liz, we were all out there. And then we went to Imperial Beach Church. We're in the San Diego area. Imperial Beach is right off of San Diego, and we went to this church, not realizing what we were getting ourselves into when we went there. We drove up to the church, and we're like, are we in the right spot? Like, we actually drove up to the door. And then I backed out away from the door, and I drove around a little bit, and I found a different parking spot, because the area that we drove up to, the building that we drove up to, was actually a bar, a brewery to be more exact. But it turns out we were in the right spot. So we went inside, and it was the first time that I have been in the middle of a church service and realized that the backdrop, instead of a cross and stained glass and screens and all of this, the backdrop was actually, like, I think it was 35 different kinds of beer off of the tap that you could get. I guess that was for later when they took communion in the afternoon. So I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing this, and over to the right, instead of a piano, we see the kombucha cooler. Is that how you pronounce that? Okay, I got it right this time. I was told during the week that I said that wrong, so I tried to get it right this time. But we're sitting here, and we're worshiping in the midst of all this. They've got the doors are wide open, and so you're feeling that very cool San Diego air, because here's the deal. There seems to be a trend that when I go to warm weather climates, it's not warm when I'm in those warm weather climates. So we enjoyed the cloudy, windy, cool weather of San Diego. until it was time to go to the conference on Monday and Tuesday, when Mike and I were sitting in a building all day and the ladies were like, hey, it is sunny and there is no wind and my wife fell asleep on the beach and I'm sitting here in a room for this entire time. I tell you all that not to rub it in that we're in San Diego, but because the church that we went to, Imperial Beach Church, a couple of cool things happened there. Number one, the speaker for the morning, who we didn't even realize was on staff, was one of the IYC speakers that the students are going to have in a couple of months. Her name is Hosanna Wong. She was there. She's done a bunch of like YouTube type spoken word videos. We've heard her speak before. It was incredible. But we also realized that this church that we are gathering with last Sunday morning is a part of a larger network of churches. And the larger network of churches that it's a part of is the very same church that we're going to be going to on Monday and Tuesday for our Exponential Learning Community Conference that we're at. And so we realize that God has taken us to a place that is doing exactly the thing that we are going to learn with others and to discuss with others as to what this means to do this in the world of church. So it was awesome worshiping with all of you last week, but we wanted to make sure that we put into practice what we always say, that when you're gone, find a group of people to gather with, because the gathering matters. Relationships happen with eye-to-eye connection, not over a screen. And so we did that, and it turns out that God used it in such a big way. It was awesome. But I want to ask you, so going back to that church and their mission, and going back to Exponential where we were and its mission and what we discussed, I wanted to come back with a question for you this morning, and that question is, what is our mission? As a church, what is I don't mean what is our mission statement, but what is our mission? As individuals, what is our mission? If we're going to be followers of Jesus and we're going to do this thing and say that we've given him our lives and we're following him, what does that mean? What is it that he's asking us to do? If we're going to follow him, that means he's going somewhere. And so where are we going with him? In Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20, Jesus gives us what that mission looks like. And some of you are going to recognize this really fast. He says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations. Our mission, according to the one that we say that we follow, is to go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. We start with the mission of going and making a disciple. But that begs the question, what is a disciple in the first place? That's kind of an old-fashioned word that you really pretty much only hear inside the church. Yes, there was a band named Disciple that played some really heavy music and everything. I was busy listening to Michael W. Smith, so I didn't really listen to Disciple growing up. But what is this disciple that it is that we say that we are called to be, that Jesus told us to be? Well, disciple, to make it as simple as possible, is a follower of Jesus. But that begs the question, what is a follower of Jesus? And I would say, to make it as simple as possible, a follower of Jesus is the one who follows the commands of Jesus. And the commands of Jesus, the three big ones, are love God, love others, and make disciples. So a disciple is a follower of Jesus who listens to his commands and follows and does what he did and makes other people who do the same thing. A follower of Jesus, a disciple, is somebody who does what Jesus did and follows his commands and makes other people who do the same thing. I want to look at this real quickly just on a macro level, on a church level. That's what Exponential was all about. This was the third module that we went to when we went to Houston a little while back and when we went to Charleston before that. That's what all of this was about. It was about making disciples, and what does that look like for a church to make disciples? So I want to bring just a piece of that back to you this morning and look at the 5 levels of disciple-making churches, or the 5 levels of church in the area of multiplication. And we're going to throw this up here on the screen. This is level number 1 in our 5 levels is subtraction. No church that I've ever come across says, I want to be in level 1. I want to be in that level where we're actually losing people and we're losing money and we're seeing people leave the doors but never walk back into the doors. That's the level that I want to be. No church, no pastor that I've ever talked to has said, I want to be a level 1 church. I want to be known as the man or the woman who pastored the church that closed its doors. Nobody has ever said that I've heard, at least. But I think the most recent estimate, the most recent stat, is that it's between 800 to 1,400 churches in the United States alone will close their doors this year and no longer gather as a church. There's only 50 states. So do the math, and you can come up with how many churches per state are estimated to close their doors this year. Because there are so many churches that are in level 1. Level 2 is the plateau level. This is the level where we're not gaining, we're not losing, we're just things are staying pretty even. We can get pretty comfortable in level 2. Level 2 is kind of that stage where it's we don't need to change anything to keep things status quo and to keep things feeling like they currently feel. We're not going to reach anybody, but we're not going to lose anybody. So at least as long as we love everybody who's currently in the room, we're going to be okay with this. And there's a lot of churches that sit there. And then we get to the addition level, and we get to level 3, which is the addition level. Oh, we jumped ahead one. He's cheating. You see what's coming next. We see level 3 coming up, and that's the addition level of church. And that's a great spot to be. It feels so good to be a level 3 church, to see new people coming in and to see more people sitting in the seats, to see the giving increase and the budget increase and the staff members, the amount of staff increase and all this. Like, it's so much fun. We see volunteers increasing. It's great. In fact, I would say it's felt good to kind of be able to say, like, hey, I think we're in this stage here. Like, we're adding people in, and it's not just because we hire people from out of state, but it's because we're actually seeing some faces that we recognize from South Knox or from the Knox County area, but who weren't gathering with us just a couple of months ago. Level 3 is a spot where it is so easy to get to this stage and be like, this is what church is all about. That church is all about getting more people into the building so that we can increase the budget, and that means we can do more stuff. But the challenge was put forth towards us, and truthfully, as I heard it, it was so refreshing. Because the mission that God gave us was never to have more backsides in seats. The mission that God gave us was to go into all the nations and make disciples. And so level 4 churches are those churches who are reproducing. We can put it this way: it is a church who has planted a church. That they can look out and say we look at Washington at some point, and we say, that church in Washington, we planted that church. Not so that we can sit there and say, man, we're so awesome, we're a level 4 church, we're better than everybody else. But so that we can look out and say, we went outside the walls and we helped a community of people gather in another place. But to really get to what God has called us to do, it's not just about planting churches. It's about planting churches that plant churches, that plant churches, that plant churches, that plant churches. It's about planting churches that are making disciples. And that's where we get to level 5, which is the multiplication. Think of a cell, and how a cell starts as 1 and then it comes into 2. We use the word split many times. The cell splits into 2, but we could also use the word the cell multiplies into 2, and then both of those 2 multiply into 2, and both of those, all 4 of those multiply and they become 8, and it just keeps going out and out and out and out and out. That's the level 5 church of multiplication. That this isn't about just what happens here. And the beautiful part of this is that so often when you get to levels 4 and 5, you know what else happens? Level 3 continues, but not always. Because level 3 is never the goal, level 5 is the goal. In fact, it could even be, and this we heard story after story of this, that it could be that a church trains up people to leave their church. Think about that for a second. A church training people to leave and go out and start the whole process over somewhere else. So that next church trains people to leave and go out and start the whole process over again. And that one trains people to leave and go out and start the whole process. I believe compound interest is kind of how this works. That it starts here and it grows, and then it grows upon the growth, and it grows upon the growth, and upon the growth, and upon the growth, and upon the growth. And imagine what kind of difference could be made if we took that mindset into our mission of following Jesus, that our mission is to make disciples, and a disciple makes disciples, so we are making disciples who make disciples who make disciples. I know this is a lot of words right now, and we're dealing with math at the same time that we're dealing with Scripture, and it's just a lot to take in at the moment. But this is what we've seen in the beginning of Acts, the parts that we've gone through so far. Acts chapters 1 through 8, what we have seen is a church that has gotten to the level 3 church. They've become the church that Peter can step up on a spot like this, and he can speak and he can share, and 3,000 people are added to their numbers that day. Incredible. We've talked about that over and over again, how incredible that would be to be able to stand up and not just speak to 3,000 people, but to have 3,000 people profess faith in Christ when you're done and get baptized and step into a walk with Him. I can't imagine what that would feel like. That's a level 3 church, like boom, here we go. And it appears that the church in Acts was kind of satisfied with that for a while. Like, this is fun, this is exciting, let's keep doing this, let's go with this. And then God begins to scatter them. Because His mission was never to have it all grow in one place. His mission was to have it go to the ends of the earth. And so we come along to Acts chapter 9 through Acts chapter 11, and we begin to see Peter, the one that Jesus had at one point said, I'm going to build my church upon you. Upon the rock, I'm going to build my church. Peter leaves the church. Oh, I don't mean like he leaves the capital C church. I mean he leaves the church in Jerusalem. The one that he helped start, the one that he stood up and 3,000 people came to Jesus, he leaves. And he heads to a town called Lydda. And he goes over there and he does some good work. And he spreads the gospel. And then he goes to another town named Joppa. And he spreads the gospel in Joppa. And while he's in Joppa, he gets a vision from God. And in this vision, I'm summarizing a lot here. I'd encourage you to read this story. In this vision, God brings down all kinds of animals on a sheet, and He says, Peter, eat. And Peter's like, I can't eat that stuff. You told me don't eat the stuff that chews the cud and has a split hoof. It has to have one or the other. Like, I can't eat this stuff. I've never eaten this stuff before in my life. And God responds to him. He says, do not call anything unclean that God has made clean. And we're reading this story, and we're going, what is going on here? Like, He's changing the rules here. Now Peter can eat all these things. Here's the most important thing that Peter can now eat. Peter can now eat bacon, people. So every time you eat bacon, I want you to remember this. God has called you to reach sinners. He has called you to go to the ends of the earth. Every time you take a delicious bite of that savory goodness in your mind, God has called me to the ends of the earth. Why? Because of what comes after the vision. The vision had nothing to do with what Peter was eating. It had nothing to do with the meat that was in front of him. The vision had to do with where God was getting to call Peter next. Because He was getting ready to send Peter up to Caesarea. And there was a man by the name of Cornelius. Cornelius was not Jewish. Cornelius was what would be called a Gentile. And Jews did not associate with Gentiles because Gentiles were dirty, rotten sinners. And they weren't going to have anything to do with them. And so before the call comes, God says, don't you dare call anything unclean that I have called clean. Okay, I added a word there. He didn't say don't you dare. But he said, don't you call anything unclean that I would call clean. And so Peter doesn't leave the Jewish faith. He leaves just speaking to the Jews, and he steps into the home of a Gentile. And I love some of the first words that he says when he walks into Cornelius' home. He walks into his home and he says, hey, just so you know, I never would have done this yesterday. Like, your home is a filthy, dirty, rotten place. He doesn't say it that way, but that's kind of what he's saying there. Like, this home was a no-go. Like, I'm looking around here going, ugh. Some of us have walked into a home at some point in our lives. We're like, I don't want to sit on the furniture in this place. He's walking in there going, yesterday, I wouldn't have sat on the furniture because it was unclean. Because Cornelius and all the people around him, they're unclean sinners. But Peter, that was yesterday. This is today. And God has called him to go to the ends of the earth. And to the ends of the earth means he's going to go into people's homes like Cornelius, and he's going to share the gospel with people like Cornelius. So again, every time you see bacon, you remember the story about Peter going to Cornelius and remembering that God has called you to the ends of the earth, which is exactly what Jesus, the one that the church finds its identity in, did. He met and ate with prostitutes. I didn't say he slept with prostitutes. I said he met and ate with prostitutes and drunks and those dreaded tax collectors. He met with all of them that people would look at and be like, never would I hang out with those scoundrels. Never would I hang out with those dirty people. Jesus met with all of them. But a disturbing thing, an unfortunate thing happens when Peter steps into the home of Cornelius and he starts to share this story. It turns out that all those people back home, they don't like it. They don't like the fact that Peter went into Cornelius' home and shared this with Cornelius because this is a Jewish thing. This is just for us. And so Peter has to come just like Jesus did. Peter had to come and he had to share why he was there. He had to share his vision. He had to share about how God had called us to these places, and Cornelius was open to it, and Cornelius stepped into the faith, and this is exactly what Jesus told us that we were going to do. And the early church hears this, and after the opposition is put out there and the pushback is put towards Peter, and they hear him come and respond, the beautiful thing happens, and that is that they hear it and they respond to it. And instead of saying, no, this is how we've always done it, this is for us, those people can sit on the back row if they're going to come in. They're certainly not going to take my seat of honor. Instead, they say then to the Gentiles also, God has offered repentance that leads to life. Church, this seems like such a simple little statement, but just for a moment, consider the conflict between the Gentiles and the Jews, and especially the Jews living in the Roman world at the time, and the way that they were ruled over by the Romans. The Romans were worshiping other gods. The Romans were eating bacon. The Romans were doing all of those things that Jewish people weren't supposed to do. Consider for a moment if 10 streetwalkers walk in our door dressed like they're getting ready to go to the corner after this, and they sit right in the middle. Are we going to embrace them, or are we going to give them a wide berth? Are we going to be willing to be found talking to them? Or are we going to say, I don't want people to catch me talking to them because they might think that I'm sleeping with them? Or consider if you're out, you go to a city right now, it's not hard to run across a group of people who are extremely high on drugs. Consider walking up to that group and actually interacting with that group and not being fearful the entire time that someone's going to assume that you're participating in the same things as that group of people. The early church, and I would say the church still today, we are commanded to live above reproach, but we have taken live above reproach to mean don't interact with people who don't. And that's not what that means. Because if that's what that means, how are we ever going to take the gospel to the ends of the earth? Living above reproach does not mean don't associate with sinners. Because if it means that, we should stop talking to each other. Every last one of us shouldn't say a word to the other, and actually we should stop talking to ourselves too. Which would be great. I would have so much less inner dialogue if I would stop talking to myself. Like, my life would be so much more peaceful if I would just stop talking to sinners altogether. Because I'd be out of the equation too. But no, God called us to do that exact thing. The early church could have been satisfied being a level 3 church, and in fact, many of them were satisfied with being a level 3 church, but because they were disciples who were committed followers of Jesus, who found their identity in Jesus, they knew that it had to go to level 4 and level 5. And that's what the call was, to go to the ends of the earth. So what are our expectations of the church? What about us? Let's fast forward this 2,000 years. Where are we at? What's our expectation of this? Is it just to have a good gathering when we come together, to make sure that the music is of high quality and the speaker is doing okay, and make sure that the tech works somewhat well, and is it to make sure that we've got the kids where they can go out of this room during this time, and make sure we do communion once a month, and is that our expectation that we have of church? Is it about adding to our numbers, and that means that we're successful? Is that there's more people coming in here on a Sunday morning? Does it mean that we're meeting budget or exceeding budget and the giving is increasing? Those are all good things, but is that our expectation? There's nothing wrong with having more people gather. There's nothing wrong with the budget being met. There's nothing wrong with things going well on the platform, but is that the limit of what it is that we're expecting when we come in here? Are we satisfied with being a level 3 church as long as it means we're not a level 1 and 2 church, right? Like, we certainly would say if we're level 1, we're not satisfied. That's not our expectation. We have no expectation that we're going to shrink, that we're going to become less. Our BSL meetings, Board of Servant Leaders meetings, might become a little less comfortable if all of a sudden we're $100,000 behind budget and 100 of you stop coming. Those would probably not be as fun of conversations. See, level 3 is exciting, but level 3 is not to the ends of the earth. So as we consider, if we're going to be level 4 and level 5, whose responsibility is it to get us there? It's mine. It's the staff. And it's you. All of us. That's what it's going to take to be a level 4 and a level 5 church. In 1 Peter 2, 9 through 10, we read the words that Peter writes. He says, "But you are the ones chosen by God, chosen for the high calling of priestly work, chosen to be a holy people, God's instrument to do his work and to speak out for him, to tell others of the night and day difference he made for you." You've heard that verse several times over the course of the past 6 months. From nothing to something, from rejected to accepted. It's the responsibility of everyone who calls themselves a follower of Christ, everyone who wants to be a disciple of Christ. It is all of those people collectively. It is their responsibility. It is my responsibility. It is our responsibility to be the ones who are going out and to making disciples of all the earth. You could take those 5 levels of the church and you could apply those to the individual. You could look at them and say that level 1, we've got those up here. Level 1 is those people who are falling away from the faith. They're the ones who at one point they were a part of this, and then they, through neglecting the spiritual disciplines, not caring about the spiritual practices, not investing in that next person, not reaching out and making the disciple, they've begun to just walk away from it. It was something that was exciting for a little while, but we all know that the more you miss, the more you don't do, the easier it is to miss, the easier it is to don't do. And so there's those people who they've started to walk away from it. And then you have the level 2. Those are the people who they would say, I feel like I'm stuck in my faith. I feel like I'm not necessarily walking away, but I don't feel like I'm growing in my faith. I'm just kind of stuck here, and it's a frustrating place to be. I've been there before where I'm like, ugh. Like, God, I don't know what you're doing here, and I want to be on board with it, but I'm In fact, I would say college was one of those times for me. I was at a Christian school, but because I was at a Christian school, it made it easy to skip all the spiritual disciplines. I don't need to gather with other people because when I go to class, I'm gathering with other Christians, for crying out loud. I literally have a class on studying the Bible. Why do I need to study the Bible any more than that? And it became so easy to just get stuck in that spot. But we also know those who, man, they would tell you, I just feel like God is doing these amazing things, and I feel like I'm growing closer and closer to Him every single day. We can grow in our faith. You're not going to have to go around this room very long before you run across somebody who would say, I can tell you about times in my life where I've grown in my faith, or I'm growing in my faith right now. It's exciting. It's awesome. And we sit there and we're like, I want to take part in every Bible study. I want to make sure I'm there every Sunday morning. The worship starts, and I'm like, man, I'm going to sing to all of these songs. And I go home and I open up my Bible and I pray, and it's awesome and it's great. But being a disciple of Jesus isn't just about you growing in your faith and your relationship with Jesus. That's part of it. Level 3 never stops. But to go to level 4, you have to start sharing your faith with other people. Sharing about the night and day difference in your life. Because Jesus never said, I'm going to make a change in you, and then I want you to keep it to yourself. Jesus said, I'm going to make a change in you, and you're going to want to share it with everybody. Why would you not want to share it with everybody? Have you ever talked to somebody who went on like a life-changing diet? They want to tell everybody about how much better they feel. And I know we sit there and we roll our eyes like, oh, I get it, you feel better, but I still feel miserable. Sometimes, yes, they're telling you that because they want to rub it in your face, but most of the time, I would say people are good in their hearts, and they're actually wanting to tell you that because they want you to experience what it feels like to be healthier. They want you to experience how much better you feel mentally and physically and even spiritually when you get things back in line with a healthy diet. And so they start sharing with everybody. But what about when we go to that next level where it's not just sharing with people, but it's intentionally investing in people so that they too can walk along this path, and I walk with them, and I actually make somebody who wants to do the same things that I'm doing because I'm doing the same things that Jesus is doing. That's the level 5 follower of Christ, is the disciple maker. Not just that I'm going to tell you and then I'm never going to talk to you again, but at least I told you. But the one who says, I'm going to intentionally invest in you so that you too can start to walk this life. We say things like that and like, man, that sounds so arrogant and you're just putting yourself above everybody. No, that's what we're called to do. Not to make them like me with my faults, but to make them like me in the ways that I'm like Him. And so we lead people and we make disciples. Level 3, just like with the church, is good. But level 5 is the mission. And we're not made to settle for good. We're made to fulfill the mission that God has sent us on. And to do that, church, as a church and as individuals, we're going to have to do a couple of things. And one of those is we're going to have to, this is exponential language here, and we're going to have to shift the scorecard of what we use. What we use to measure our ability to fulfill the mission. As a church, we measure things like, and we measure these, I don't look at them a whole lot, but we measure how many people are here on Sunday morning. Churches all over the place, they measure how many people are gathered on Sunday morning, and then they report it to the larger bodies, their denomination heads, whatever it is, and they give their Easter numbers because those always look better. And so we measure how well we're doing based on how many people are here on Sunday morning, or we measure how well we're doing based on the budget, or we measure how well we're doing based on how many baptisms we've had. We have all these different measurement tools, and none of those, again, are bad things. It's good to have more people here. It's good for the budget to increase. It's good to have more baptisms. All of those are good. But in order to become that level 5 church, it's going to have to be that we begin to measure how many people do we have that are discipling other people. That's a lot more work. It's more work for the individual doing the discipling, but it's also more work for the church to measure. But how many people do we have who are discipling other people? How many outward expressions do we have of gospel sharing? Meaning, how many things are coming out of this group of people, this body of people, that impact the people outside of these walls on Sunday morning? How much of that is going on? We're going to have to shift where the scorecard is. And in our personal lives, we're going to have to shift the scorecard. Bible reading, amount of time we read the Bible is good. The amount of times that we show up on Sunday morning is good, or Wednesday nights, or small groups, that's good. The amount of time we spent in prayer, that's good, that's important. We should pay attention to those things, but we're going to have to take it to the next level, and we're going to have to start measuring how many conversations have I actually had with people today about Jesus? How many of my interactions that I had throughout the course of my week actually pointed people towards Jesus? And I don't just mean I didn't cuss, and I didn't tear anybody down, so obviously I pointed people. No, how many times did we intentionally point people towards Jesus this week? And measuring things like, how many people am I discipling? And we begin to measure things like that. We shift the scorecard, and when we shift the scorecard, we shift our expectations as well. Now, I asked you a while, what do you expect of church? What are our expectations of all of this? Is our expectation just that we gather on Sunday morning? And that's all it takes to be a member of the church, the capital C church? Or is our expectation that we go when this is over? That we don't just leave it here, but we actually take it into Knox County and Illinois and Kentucky and all the places that we go throughout the course of a week? What's the expectation of being a follower of Christ as far as the church is concerned? Is it just that we're consumers and we expect everybody else to do everything so that we can sit here and we can get done at the end of it and go, man, you know what? I really liked the music today. She was on point with that song. I would say those two young ladies that sang that song up here at the table, they were on point with singing that song. And we can walk out and be like, man, I feel good. And the pastor didn't go too long today, so I feel good about that one too. My kids were taken care of, so I feel good about that. Are we just consumers, or are we contributors also? Are we serving one another? And I don't necessarily mean just volunteering, but are we serving one another? Are we paying attention to the person sitting in the pew around us who might be hurting this morning? And we're going to build into their life this morning. We're going to lift them up. Or the person who's falling away, are we going to grab onto them and be like, we're not going to let you fall away. We're going to hang on to you and we're going to pull you back in, because God uses people to pull people back to the faith too. Are we just here to consume, or are we here to contribute? And in our individual lives, is the expectation just that I give him, 5 minutes in the Bible and maybe 5 to 10 minutes of prayer and to show up on Sundays? Or is the expectation in my life that I'm going to give him everything? And that if he says, hey, I actually want you to go somewhere else. And I don't just mean like, hey, I want you to leave Monroe City Church and go to Vincennes First Church instead. I'm not talking about that like go somewhere else. Actually, a lot of people around the world, they love doing that with churches. Like, I'm fine leaving a church if I don't like the church. But I'm talking about, what if he says, hey, you currently are a youth pastor in Wyoming, and I want you to move to this place you've never heard of in Indiana. Or you're currently a youth pastor in Minnesota, and I want you also to move to this place that you've never heard of in Indiana. And the day may come where he says that to me again. And we have discussions all the time as a family of, will we go? Because even though we'd never heard of this place 6 years ago, we love this place. I was just talking to the Birches this morning about how this is home for us. And so we have to have those very real discussions of, will we go if he calls us to go? Will we truly give him everything? And no, I'm not about to say that I'm getting ready to go. So some of you are like, dang it. And others of you are like, oh, thank goodness. That's not where this is headed. I love the way Jim Dalrymple, a professor at Ozark Christian College in Missouri, says. He says, we have the opportunity to unlock doors for people to come in and sit at the table with Jesus and eat with him in unity. Remember what I said about the table earlier? We have the opportunity to unlock the doors, just like Peter did for Cornelius. Jesus had told Peter that you're the one who's going to go out and you're the one who's going to unlock the doors for the Gentiles to come in. Peter didn't understand what he meant at the time. Peter's understanding in Acts chapter 11 what Jesus meant when he said that. Because he is unlocking the doors to following Christ for the Gentiles. And he's inviting them to come in and sit at the table with him and to eat with him in unity. Because the table is where strangers become friends and friends become family. Churches, we go out into the world. We have the opportunity to invite people to the table. The table that we sang about this morning, the table that we remember when we receive communion, the table that says it doesn't matter what your history is, it doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter if you're Judas who sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, it doesn't matter if you sold him for free. What matters is that Jesus will forgive you, and he has given you amazing grace, and he's inviting you back to the table that you said no to. And it is there for you. So our mission as a church, as fun as it is and as exciting as it is to have more people gather with us and sing with us on Sunday mornings and more kids come on Wednesday nights and all of that, our mission as a church is to make disciples of the world. That means us as a body, and that means you and I as individuals. That's what God has called us to. A disciple is a follower of Jesus. And a follower of Jesus is somebody who does what Jesus did and follows his commands and then makes more people who do the same thing. A disciple, we've been chewing on this one in staff, but a disciple cannot be a disciple if they're not making disciples. And so for us to sit and say, I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm a disciple of Jesus, can someone come up to you and say, who are you discipling? Who have you discipled? And your answer is no one? Then you're not a disciple. Now I get it, we're at different levels, we're at different stages. Some of us are new in the faith, and we're not saying that on day one, automatically you're going to make disciples. But he does call us right away to start telling people about the night and day difference in our lives. The longer we wait to tell people, the less likely it is that we'll ever tell people. A disciple is not a disciple if they're not making disciples. So where are you today? If you were to have to look at that level 1 through 5, where would you land? Would you say, God, I'm confident that the day is going to come that you're going to look at me and say, well done, you have run the race, here's your prize? Or are we going to have to be honest and say, that day is going to come, and if God were to talk to me right now, he'd say, you ran a race, but it wasn't the race I sent you on. Because the race I sent you on was to love God, love others, and make disciples. That's the origin story of the church. That's the origin of a people who find their identity in Christ. So where are you, and where would you say we are as a church?